Hi friends, we are in Dodge City, Kansas, and this is what we've been waiting for. You know, we spent the last night in Cimarron, and we will show you where we stayed in a few moments. It was awesome, it really was. An old hotel from the late 1800s. I think it was built in 1886, finished in 1887, and you'll meet the owner and she'll tell you some really cool history of that area. And so we're getting ready to go in the museum and look around, and I guess you will too. We want to give a big shout out to the Cimarron Hotel for sponsoring this episode of Gene and Renee Travel Adventures, and we'll put a link to their website down in the comment section so you can check them out anytime you're coming through Kansas. This is the Airbnb that we're staying at. It was the hotel here in town, and the cowboys and stagecoaches came by here back in the 1800s, and they would stop there and spend the night. And so we're cowboys. We're gonna stop and spend the night too. And we thank you so much for joining us on the journey. Don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe if you've not already done so, share the video. We appreciate that. Drop us a comment. We love hearing from you and being able to respond back to you. From Cimarron to Dodge City is only about 19 miles. It's a straight shot, so to speak. We had one reason to go into Dodge City, and that was to check out the old western town and historic museum that highlights the cowboy days that every young boy dreamed about. Even before going into the museum, we had to check out the old train. The railroad played a significant role in the prosperity of early Dodge City. When the railroad was established here in 1872, Dodge City became the ideal location for shipping buffalo hides to points east on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. Engine 1139 was built in 1903 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works at a cost of $19,846.98. Specifications include a boiler pressure of 200 pounds per square inch, heating surface of 2,864 square feet, water capacity of 8,500 gallons, and an oil capacity of 3,300 gallons. It weighs 305,200 pounds and has traveled approximately 1 million miles. On July 7, 1954, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad Company donated the engine with a cold car and tender to the Boot Hill Museum. The museum begins in the gift shop where you purchase your tickets. There is much to learn and explore about the Indian tribes that lived on the plains, the early pioneers who traveled by train or wagon across the prairie, and the massive herds of buffalo that sadly were hunted nearly to extinction. The museum does a wonderful job of helping you to imagine what it would have been like to have lived in the old western town of Dodge City. From saloons to outlaws and lawmen, not only do you get to imagine yourself there, but you can see and hear actors portraying famous people of that era.
The richest man in town started out in a sock.
They can't move.
Would you believe I thought my career was over? I came from one of the best families in Boston. Sang operating New York, all the best parts.
Not everyone has seen how long I've been in Dodge. Wyatt here just came back. Couldn't stay away.
Yeah, I thought you quit Dodge for good. Don't ride me.
I've been gone about 4 years, yes, sir. I left Dodge not long after that business with that singer that was gunned down.
As long as we don't ask them to obey the law.
Before we go any further, and you definitely do not want to miss the gunfight reenactment coming up, I want to let you meet Miss Kathleen Holt. She's the owner of the Cimarron Hotel, built back in 1887. We spent last night here, and she graciously sponsored this episode. Kathleen will give you some of the history of this old hotel, and we'll show you the rooms we stayed in. All right, friends, we are right now visiting with Miss Kathleen Holt. And Miss Kathleen is the owner of the hotel here. And Kathleen, first of all, thank you so much for sponsoring this episode of Gene and Renee Travel Adventures and taking time out of your evening to sit and talk with us a bit. Thank you.
Great. I'm happy to do so. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. How long have you owned the hotel?
You know, you're putting me in PTSD right off the start.
Uh-oh.
We bought the hotel in 1977,
Okay.
but I recently did the math and I moved in 82, which I believe is more than 40 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we were married in 84, and we're
Oh.
year 39 now, so about 41 years. Is this home for you, this area, or where were you originally from?
Well, I grew up here and then I went away for what I call the obligatory 15 years and then came back in 77 and raised my kids here. My kids ended up graduating from the same high school that my dad and his siblings graduated from, which is not too common anymore.
Right.
That generational stuff doesn't often happen, but yep.
When you bought the hotel, is it now what you envisioned it to be, or?
When actually, I can't say that I was very enthusiastic about buying the hotel in the beginning. My ex-husband fell in love with it, and there was a restaurant on the main floor. And I really wasn't interested in having a restaurant and running a hotel, and had another career in mind. And then he bought the hotel, and it was sort of one of those things. I fell in love with the history and got involved in history in a big way. It ended up that I ended up being the president of the State Historical Society at one time. I've been very active in preservation in our state, and particularly rural preservation. So my career changed at that point, and then we divorced in 1982, and the kids and I moved in the hotel. I thought, you don't want to have a house to take care of and a hotel to take care of. So currently I live now, my kids are grown, and I hate to say how old they are, older than I was when I bought the hotel. But they grew up here, and now it's my dog Sancho Panza and me on the in the upstairs. So.
Well, speaking of the history, now you run Airbnb, and I think you probably have some long-term tenants as well.
Yes, we do.
But
Yes.
originally, this was a hotel that I'm taking it that folks on the stagecoach, folks, cowboys,
Yes.
this is where they would come and stay when they were traveling to Dodge City.
Traveling period to
Okay.
come to the area. Cimarron is on the Santa Fe Trail, but of course that predates the hotel in 1886. But people still traveled by wagon when the hotel was built. And when you read the old newspapers of the time, you hear stories of wagons being stuck on the main street because it was so muddy, and the boardwalks that were laid down so that people could walk on top of the muddy streets and that kind of thing. So the hotel in rural western Kansas, on the prairie, there were no trees. So there wasn't building materials. So all of the wood that came in had to come in on the train or be carried by wagon, which of course is why people lived in dugouts or made adobe bricks for building things. But people would come to town. By the 1880s, 1886, the hotel was started and then completed in 1887. My very favorite thing about that, Jean, is the fact it opened as the New West Hotel in 1886. So I think of the renovation I do now as the next New West Hotel, and of course it was named the Cimarron Hotel in 1947, I believe. So yes, prior to that it was called the Luther Inn. But what would happen, I don't talk in a straight line, so you'll have to travel with me here, but when the hotel was built, there wasn't any place for people to live when they came to settle here. And there were reasons for them to come to settle, not just homesteading, but also people would come and things would occur, and it was quite a boom times at that time. And the people would come to make their living, to make their fortunes, and wanted to be near Dodge City. But of course, Dodge City had, it was the railhead, it's where the buffalo hide shipped out, it's where the cattle came to be shipped to market. And Dodge City's Old West time occurred. Actually now, the hotel is one of the few authentic buildings of that period left. And it's been operating as a hotel since that time. So at that time, people would have come to the hotel to live, because there wasn't any place to live until you could get together enough to be able to bring in lumber. And there was a lumber yard, of course, and so to build, to make your home. There were 6 hotels in this little town of however many it was at that time. 6 hotels. 3 oyster bars, which blows my mind. Why are you in Kansas, in dry country, with as far as you can about be from any ocean and still be in the United States, and you're hungry for oysters? So, but they brought those in on the train too. So
Now, you said that there weren't trees, for the lumber to build it up, and the lumber came in on train. Was that coming from the East Coast, or was that coming from Colorado, or?
I never thought of that. I suppose from the east. Everything was pretty much back east. Western expansion came. There were a lot of Kansas settlers came from Massachusetts, for example, and of course, Go West, Young Man occurred, and yeah, I haven't thought of that, but I would assume back east.
And there's your doggy.
Yes, he's here.
But he's not showing up on the camera. We'll show him to you in just a few moments. He's a sweetheart little dog, big dog compared to Jenny.
Oh.
How many? We're staying in the parlor room. That we'll show that to you in just a moment. But how many other rooms do you have?
Well, upstairs on the 3rd floor of the hotel, and I used to rent those rooms when I had lots of kids around and people to help more. But now that we're it's Sancho and me, we mostly just have the 3rd floor, and we rent it out sometimes for weddings or family reunions. There are 10 bedrooms, 3 of which have a little adjoining sitting room next to them. And then we call that European style sometimes, 2.5 bathrooms in the middle of the hall. And then I live on 2nd floor, and then we have the 3 units on the main floor. 2 of those units are occupied by long timers right now. And then we have the parlor suite, which is our main guest suite.
And after you see it, if you're traveling in Kansas, you're going to want to stop here, and this is where you're going to want to stay, and you're going to want to hear some history from Miss Kathleen telling you all about that. Hey, buddy. What was I going to ask? Oh, yeah. All right, so 1886, 87. Any famous cowboys or gunslingers or any of that kind of stuff come through? Or?
Yes, we were very lucky, and this is just one of those things. A gentleman in the, I can't remember if it was 50s or 60s, but whatever, last century, was out at the dump, and a woman that owned the hotel from 1947 until the early 70s had done some cleaning out, and she sent a truck to the dump to get rid of things. And the last thing the person that was unloading her truck threw on the top of the junk heap was an old book. And this gentleman in town was out there doing his own deposits, and he saw it, and he went over and got it, and it was the original register.
Wow.
And so he captured it, and he took it to a woman whose family owned the hotel from 1902. The original builder was Nicholas Klain. He was a judge from Dodge City, and he was a newspaper publisher. He published the Dodge City Times that eventually became the Dodge City Globe, which is still in existence. And when he made the hotel, he published a newspaper on your side of the building, so you actually will be sleeping in what was a newspaper office.
Cool.
For a while. And so that was his claim to fame. Well then, so he's throughout, opened as, they called it Klain's Hotel, but it was officially the New West, and we saw that. Well, as we look through that original register, it's just fascinating. Of course, it's pretty fragile, and it's owned by the woman's grandson now, who's an adult, and she's long gone, but we've taken good photographs of it, and we found the most interesting, although there are lots of interesting stories in it when you think historically. You would see so-and-so, John someone, came from Massachusetts, and he would stay in the hotel. And then maybe a month later, you would see he and his wife came and stayed in the hotel. And then pretty soon you would see he and his wife came for lunch, but their address is now Cimarron. And so you realize these are the very real names and stories of the people who settled in Wild West, in the Old West. There, of course, Dodge City was known, and partly the founding of Dodge City was that there was no liquor allowed on federal facilities, which would have been Fort Dodge. And so there was a law that said the only liquor had to be so many feet or yards or whatever from a fort. So Dodge City was founded, the first liquor store to start that close to the fort. And so it did have that kind of saloon life south of the tracks, the railroad tracks in Dodge City. And there was a man named Luke Short, who is considered to be even more of a notorious gunfighter than was Wyatt Earp or Bat Masterson. They got more press, though. And so Luke Short was part owner of the Long Branch Saloon. Nicholas Klain, who was the man that built the hotel, was the probate judge. So he was known as Judge Klain, and he became a part of a group that included the mayor and Judge Klain and the sheriff. And they decided they were going to pass an ordinance that said no lewd women or piano players in the bars. So that night, all the bars were shut down. The next night, the bar across the street from the Long Branch opened with the lewd women and piano player that the night before had been in the Long Branch. And now they're across the street in a bar owned by one of those vice commission people that passed the ordinance. So you can imagine that Luke Short was not happy about that.
Right.
And so Luke Short got in a tussle and told the sheriff he would meet him at the depot platform and they would shoot it out. And you know, when I tell the story, people think that it's a made-for-TV story. But it's actually what transpired. And the sheriff showed up there, put Luke Short on the train, and had him run out of town, so to speak. Well, Luke Short was a good friend of Bat Masterson. So Bat Masterson and Luke Short telegraphed and got together, and Bat Masterson was a friend of the governor at the time. So they went to the governor, and the governor said, you have to let Luke Short back into town to sell his interest in the Long Branch. And he'll leave town, but he has to go back. So he started back on the train, and they sent some gunfighters to Larned, which is about 45 minutes to an hour from Dodge City on down the train line. And then they were gonna take care of Luke Short there, but the governor sent militia, and Bat Masterson said, if you hurt a hair on the head of my friend here, then you're gonna pay for that. So it ended up that Luke Short was able to go into Dodge, sell his property. That occurred a couple of years before he comes into Cimarron. There's some speculation that there was a trial or legal action after that, and he may have come back for that. But he is signed into that register as Luke Short from Shortwood and Short Luke from Lukeville. And his friend with him was J.P. Pretty from Prettyville. And you can just imagine this man. He's a small man, nattily dressed, and he's described as being very ornery. And don't you just think he had to go, you can run me out of Dodge, but you can't run me out of Cimarron.
Right.
And so here he is at his Nemesis hotel and ready to have lunch, or who knows what the purpose was. I think it was probably just to poke the bear.
To do whatever he wanted to do.
Yes, that's right. I'm going to do that. And you know, one thing I love about this building, it's not the most ornate and fancy Victorian building, but it is a giant bucket of stories. And sometimes I sit down here in the lobby, or I'll fix something, I'll pull up a board and it's got square nails in it. Or I think this very worn rug under these other rugs working to preserve it. Every person that's walked in here, that's the original lobby desk. They've walked across that rug. Their footprints are there. And I just think, you know, it's a building full of every one of those dreamers and story peoples and movers, and lots of people will come in and say, my grandmother lived here, or every teacher that came. And of course, it's the only one left now, but it's also the only lodging facility left in Dodge City as well. Everything, all the original hotels from Dodge City were torn down too. So I always think of it as, I say Cimarron is where the cowboys literally went to get the heck out of Dodge, because it was a day's horse ride away from Dodge. And so we know that happened a lot. We have, in addition to this, not just about the hotel, but we have an interesting, we were one of several county seat wars in Kansas in which there was a fatality, involved Bill Tillman and Bat Masterson's brother Ed, and that's another time he said, if you harm a hair on the head of my brother, there'll be heck to pay. So yeah, it was a very real period of time. I think some people don't understand that, because the 50s cowboy movies and television shows, it was based on the history. It was a little bit modified, like we always used to laugh in the television show Cimarron when they had gunfights in the mountains between here and Dodge. And you know, as Kansas is not flat like the stereotype, but neither is it mountainous like fake Old West in California either. So yeah, so to me, just to be here, to be a steward for this period of time of a building that has so many stories and how much history is a real honor for me. So,
And it's an honor for us to be able to spend the night here. And it's one of those things that if these walls could talk, if
Yes.
these carpets and the floorboards beneath them could tell the stories that they would tell. And thank you for sharing that story with us.
Sure.
So we appreciate it so much. And hey, let's go take a look in that parlor room right now, those rooms that we're going to be spending the night in. And we're going to put a link to her website, and you can check it out. And if you're coming through this area, this is where you're going to want to stop and spend the night. So you can contact her, and let's go show you right now what it looks like. Thank you, Miss Kathleen.
you bet.
Thank you, Miss Kathleen and Cimarron Hotel for sponsoring this episode. I'll put a link to their website and to their Airbnb in the More section beneath the title of this episode. Hey, are you ready for a gunfight? Let's go check it out.
Fun fact, we're not allowed in the long-range saloon anymore.
What?
Something about fighting and breaking stuff.
That kid's face into the mirror.
He started the whole thing.
Well, I know, but we can't go in there anymore. The good news is there's 16 other saloons in town.
Good.
And I think the girls at the Saratoga are better looking anyway.
Well, let's get going.
I didn't get you a beer, though.
Saratoga guys.
Did I steal those beer money?
Hey, mister!
Yeah, probably not.
How you letting you get away with that?
Go back inside by your mom.
That ain't happening, mister.
Put it
See what's
down.
gonna happen? This!
So instead of going to the Saratoga saloon, we should probably just leave town. Yeah. Hey, let's go. Hurry up. Hurry up.
What's going on out here? Hey, come on up right there, mister. Man, Inspector knows all things. Deputy, check that fella. See if he's the doctor or the undertaker.
What seems to be the problem?
The whole problem is I step out here, you're approaching a man. Is it? He's dead? He's gone, Marshal. He's gone. That just got a little more complicated, mister.
Yeah.
See, if he's a doctor, if he's needed a doctor, we get him patched up and you might just walk away, but here's what's gonna happen.
Walk around for what? I didn't do
You're gonna
nothing.
take that gun belt off, and you're gonna go up to jail with my deputy and get this sorted out.
I didn't do nothing.
Didn't say you did or didn't, but I'm gonna let the judge sort it out.
Listen, mister, I heard a bunch of shooting. So I grabbed my guns, came on out. Looked like that fella got shot.
And I saw even less. So here's what I'm doing. You're going to jail. If you don't like that,
Jail?
you're going to jail till the judge can sort this out. He'll be in town tomorrow.
Tomorrow, person gets killed, that fella called all the way out of here, and you're sitting here arresting me.
He ran awfully fast.
Boy, he ducked one of the storefronts.
Well, then I'll go check those storefronts out.
Well, go
But right
get
now,
it.
you're right here. Mister, you're going to do as I say, or we're going to dig a hole for you.
Dig a hole for me. Doing nothing wrong.
I get paid for arrest, so I don't like it. But where you're going, you're going to get one. Take your guns off nice and slow. Do as I ask.
Nice and easy, mister.
Hey, easy. I don't want no trouble here. I got a gun on me.
You'll
Calm
go
down.
on the ground, and then he'll
He'll
go
go
up, and
down.
he'll take you to the...
God!
That wasn't very smart.
Keep your hand away from that gun, mister.
Pick him up, Chip. Haul him in his hall. Chip.
Yeah.
Hey, Doc's not in his office. He's in dry goods. I
Dry
just came
goods?
out.
He's in the dry
He
goods?
was getting fitted for a suit.
Get him.
You take him up to the office, he'll just bleed everywhere.
That's a pretty fancy shooting there, Law Dog.
Yeah? What are you boys doing over there? You see what happened to that fella?
Nope, we were inside drinking. We heard the shooting and came out.
You didn't see what happened to that boy? You know that big one?
No, never met him. Never seen him.
Well, then get going. I gotta talk to people who actually saw what happened.
We can't spend it. Okay, we'll leave.
Well, you got your hog legs on.
We're going. What are you gonna do with him now?
We'll get him patched up. Doc do his job. We'll haul him up to jail. Judge will see him tomorrow. If he's guilty, he'll hang. If he's innocent, he'll walk.
Are them hangings public?
They are. Are you sure you don't know him?
Never saw him before.
No, sir.
Let's get going.
don't even remember his face.
Well,
You see what happened?
you
still want to go to Saratoga?
We can't let them hang James.
Question. If they do, it's me and you and those.
I know. We need it.
Yeah. Well, they just had that one old scrawny feller with him.
Yeah, we can get him.
I can knock him
out. Get James out of there. We got guns too. We can shoot him. I mean, we should probably be quiet so we don't get that marshal out here. But we could probably shoot him if we have to. Pretty solid plan, I think.
I think there's only one problem with the plan.
What?
You know, talking about being quiet so they don't hear? All them heard.
All those people. Well, the good news is if we shoot one of them, the rest of them will keep their mouths shut.
Well, maybe last resort.
Last resort.
Yeah.
You don't shoot anybody?
Not yet, but I'd watch that little one right there. We'll go over here.
Keep your mouths shut.
I'm used to that.
Out of here in no time.
Just shut up. I know. Yep. You didn't do anything.
Hurry up.
You go get him. Marshal!
Hey, shut up.
Marshal!
You got a lot of shots?
Put my gun down.
I told you I knew nothing wrong.
I'm not feeling so good. I don't suppose any of you folks are good at digging holes. Nobody? The bartender, we throw in a pint of whiskey.
Did you say whiskey?
You're dead.
What?
You're dead.
Oh, that's right.
How about this instead, folks? How about a round of applause?
This replica of what Front Street looked like in the 1870s was erected in 1958. The Fort Dodge Jail, built in 1865, was located in Fort Dodge, about 5 miles east of Dodge City. It has an interesting story to it. It was the U.S. Army's equivalent of the county jail, which was a place of incarceration for petty crimes and was called a guardhouse. Larger jails on bigger posts were known as stockades. The jail was in use in the 1860s and 1870s. Soldiers were often confined in this small structure for weeks at a time. The jail was miserably cold in the winter, even worse in the stifling heat of the summer, and was not equipped with any facilities. In 1872, the commandant of the fort banned alcohol for all enlisted men and civilians, so it can be assumed at that time some soldiers were confined to this jail for alcohol-related offenses. In the early 1950s, the Dodge City Jaycees asked officials from the Kansas Soldiers' Home, formerly Fort Dodge, if they could give the jail to Boot Hill Museum. However, by state law, they were not allowed to donate or sell the jail to the museum, but if it were stolen, no charges would be pressed. So on November the 1st, 1953, a group of Jaycees with horses and dust masks sneaked out to the fort during the night and acquired the 1865 jail. Some of those buried at Boot Hill included Bernie Shepard. January 17, 1873, he was an employee of the railroad. Barney was shot and killed while accompanying Ed Hurley as he was chased out of town by the Vigilante Committee. And Jack Reynolds, September 1872, the first recorded killing in Dodge City. He was shot 6 times by a track layer. Charlie Morehouse, a gambler by trade, died December 1872. J.M. Essington, November 1872, a carpenter and part owner of the Essington Hotel shot by the cook. George Hoey, one of the first bodies buried at Prairie Grove, shot by Wyatt Earp and Jim Masterson, 1878. Alice Chambers, May the 5th, 1878. Alice was the last person buried on Boot Hill. According to one newspaper report, there were over 60 bodies buried on Boot Hill. Hollywood certainly made the Wild West and Dodge City famous. In 1955, Hollywood made the ultimate tribute to Dodge City's past, a little radio and television show called Gunsmoke. It aired from 1955 to 1975. Gunsmoke earned the title of the second longest-running television series in history. Miss Kitty and Matt Dillon, they made their way into millions of American living rooms every week. The series continues to entertain audiences today with television movies and worldwide syndication. By 1872, Fort Dodge, established in 1865, was not only a place for U.S. Army soldiers, but it was also a trading post, and it was a meeting place where traders along the Santa Fe Trail and buffalo hunters would also come. People bought supplies at the post store or at Sutler's store. The store was also a popular spot for the drinking of alcoholic beverages. When the drinking got out of hand, the commandant of Fort Dodge, Colonel Richard Dodge, stopped the sale of alcohol at the fort. In anticipation of the railroad and of a new town, George Hoover, a 24-year-old Canadian, went to Kansas City and brought a wagon load of whiskey back to the area. Hoover tied a rag to the wheel, measured off 5 miles from the fort, and dropped the tailgate of the wagon. On June 17, 1872, at 8 o'clock in the morning, he opened for business. Hoover and his partner, John G. McDonnell, erected a tent about halfway between the present-day 1st and 2nd Avenues south of the tracks. Other businesses followed, and the rest is history. In 1885, many of the original buildings located on Front Street had burned and were rebuilt in brick. Hamilton Bell served as a lawman for 36 years in Dodge City and western Kansas. He was less well known than Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson. Bell was an important lawman in his own right, though. He lived in Dodge City from 1874 to 1947. In 1878, Bell was the first to introduce the can-can to Dodge City. Though his variety saloon only lasted one season, the lively Parisian dance caused quite a stir. Without televisions and radios, most people found their entertainment from the newspaper. It took 2 people most of a week to print a 4-page newspaper. A small paper had a circulation of 600 to 700, while larger daily papers had a circulation of 2,000 or more and had more workers. Another industry that is always needed, sadly, is the undertaker. Death was something that came often to the young in the wild cattle towns, such as Dodge City in its early days. Despite the regular occurrence of death, there were still losses that greatly affected the people to their core. Ed Masterson's death in April of 1878 was one that the entire community mourned. Masterson had been in Dodge from its beginning and was killed in the line of duty. All the businesses in town closed at 10 a.m. in the morning of the funeral service and draped their windows and doors in black crepe. They remained closed until 6 p.m. that evening. Naturally, people needed to receive post and, on occasion, mail a letter. They also needed a safe place to keep their money, such as the bank here in Dodge City, which was built in 1885. Getting your picture taken was a newer concept. Sometimes people look at pictures from the Old West and wonder why the people did not smile. Several reasons for this. Life was hard. People lacked the creature comforts that we have today. They had limited health care and died much younger than we do today. Another reason is that people had bad teeth. We're spoiled by having easy access to a dentist and an orthodontist, but people in the late 1800s did not. Another reason, they thought smiling made them look silly in a picture. Formal photographs were just that, formal. And finally, people didn't smile because of the long exposure time. The time that a camera needed to take a picture made it important for the subject of a picture to stay as still as possible. That way, the picture wouldn't look blurry. You would have to sit still for up to a minute as the picture was being taken. In Dodge City, you can take a tour of a Victorian-era home as well as a local church from that time period. A trip to Dodge City, Kansas is always an interesting look back into the last days of America's wild, wild west as the times and the culture transitioned into the 20th century. Again, a huge thank you to Kathleen Holt and the Cimarron Hotel for sponsoring this episode. I'll drop a link in the More section beneath this episode's title so that you can connect with the Cimarron Hotel. As always, friends, thank you for joining us on the journey.